You guys want to move closer? Sure. Come closer.
Come on down.
Hard to see everybody. Right.
Right.
So what we're going to do is, I prepared some questions. I'll ask the questions and then we'll have a Q&A. Do you want them to ask questions?
Sure,
when
of
you're
course.
talking?
Sure.
So if you have any follow-up questions to my questions, please feel free. Shout out because it's really hard to see from here. Just raise your hand and say, question. So my first question is, how did you begin your film scoring career?
That's always an interesting question for me because I always feel bad answering it because I know some youngsters go to school and try to find a formal way of entering into the film business. And for me, it just totally happened by mistake. We were doing the music for Spike Lee's Mo Better Blues. At the same time, I was getting ready to do my first solo project for Columbia Records. So we were doing the pre-records that the band would sync to, Denzel and all those guys, and Wesley. So we took a break during the session, and I had been working on a tune that I wanted to record on my album. It's called Sing Soweto. And as I was playing it on the piano, Spike walks by and he goes, "Man, what's that?" I said, "Oh, it's one of my tunes." And he goes, "Oh, so can I use it?" And what am I gonna say? No. So I said, "Sure." And then when we recorded it just solo trumpet, a cappella. That was his notion at first, because the scene is a scene with Denzel on the bridge, playing his horn by himself. But when he shot the scene, he kind of felt like it was empty, and he tried to do stuff like add train noises because he was on the, on the what they call it, the L in other places. And then he came to me, man, and he said, "You think you could write a string arrangement for it?" And again, what am I going to do? Say no? I lied and said yes. And so it was funny though. As soon as I got off the phone with him, I called my composition teacher. I said, "Hey, Roger," his name is Roger Dickinson. I said, "Roger, look, man, I got this thing to do. I don't know what am I going to do?" And I was expecting like some concrete answer. He goes, "Trust your training." Like, come on, man. No, I need to know how to start, who's going to play what, and all of this. But I went ahead and did the arrangement, and this thing was just it was just a comedy throughout the entire process. I brought the arrangement in, and I handed it to his father, because his father was scoring the movie at the time. And then his father goes, "No, you wrote it, you conducted." I was like, "Excuse me?" What? So I remember, I had never stood in front of an orchestra before, but I remember taking sight singing classes in high school, and I remember that 1 was here, 2 was here, 3 was here, 4 was here. That's what I had, Left hand just kind of mimicked what the right hand was doing. There was no cueing, or I was like, if you didn't come in, shame on you, because I was giving you the beats. So we got through it, man, and it was an amazing experience. And soon as it's so funny, because I always tell people things have happened in my life, and the good Lord has had me had these experiences in such a way where my ego can't get big, because we finished that thing and I'm like buzzing, like, man, that was amazing. I stood in front of 70 people waving my hands and they played what I wrote. This is incredible. And Spike comes up to me and he goes, "You have a future in the film business, right?" And I'm like, "Wow, thank you." And I was just floating, and I had to go to the bathroom. This was BMG Studios. I walked out of Studio A and walked up the hall, And right outside the bathroom door was another mastering studio, and this dude was mastering Stravinsky's Rite of Spring.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Yes. So my ego went, "Boo." Just like that. I was like, yeah, okay, bro, you got a lot of work to do, man. So, I mean, you know, he called me to do Jungle Fever after that, and we just kind of been progressing as the years have gone on. And it was interesting because when we when we got nominated for uh, Black Klansman, it was him, Barry Alexander, myself, doing an interview with this journalist, and he goes to all three of us. He says, "So, what is it like working together for 30 years?" And you should have seen the look on all of our faces. We were like, "Shit, 30 years? Damn, I guess it's been 30 years." Uh, but it's been a beautiful experience working with them. Because here's the thing about them, and this is the thing I'll tell anybody who wants to get into any artistic endeavor: they do it because they love it. Whenever we have conversations about what it is we need to do for the film, we don't talk about demographics. We don't talk about sales. We don't talk about marketing. We talk about what's best for the movie, you know, and that's my orientation of being in the film business. And I love that because for me, it's about the art, you know, more so than anything.
How do you approach a film score?
Well, you know, Roger Dig, I always, there's two people I talk about in my life, Roger Dickinson and Art Blakey. Those two guys really had a huge impact on my life. And Roger started teaching me composition from the age of 16. And one of the things that he used to tell me all the time, he said, the music is there telling you what it needs. You have to learn how to listen. What he's basically saying is get your ego out of the way, you know? So when I approach a film, sometimes it's a terrifying moment. And I'm not the only one that's gone through this. I've talked to Thomas Newman, I've talked to Harry Gregson Williams. You know, they've had similar experiences where as soon as you get a film, you feel like you don't know what to do. You know what I mean?
I sure do.
Yes. Yeah. So there's this moment of fear because you sit there and you go, wow. And what it really boils down to is that everybody's done a ton of work before they've given it to you, because you're seeing an almost finished project. You know, the acting is great, the editing is great, the look of it is amazing. You know, the scenery is just gorgeous or appropriate for whatever thing it is. And then they hand it to you. And they hand it to you wanting you to have answers right away. And for me, I have to digest things, you know, for a second. And so I always tell them, I'm like, hey, bro, can I live with it for a second just before we delve into it? Because they've, you know, most directors forget they've been dealing with the project for months and months and months, and then they bring a composer on and goes, all right, tell me what we need to do. It's like, dude, you know, let me absorb it. So I try to watch the film. I'm doing that right now there's a documentary about Louis Armstrong that I'm going to be working on. And I'm doing that right now with that, where I watch it and I try to get a feel for the entire thing, and then go back and watch it again and just try to pick out certain areas. There was another great film composer who was my mentor. His name was Miles Goodman. Miles had taught me how to try to look at where the deficiencies are in a film, whether the film needs to have pace to speed up, or whether the music needs to kind of calm things down, whatever the case may be. And I try to identify those things. Then I have a conversation with the director, you know, because he may have a different approach, or he or she may have a different approach to scoring it. So I just try to compile a lot of information, you know, first. And in doing that, that kind of sends me down a path, you know, whether it's to start thinking about certain instrumentation, or to start thinking about certain harmonic progressions or rhythmic, you know, ideas, whatever the case may be. It's one of the reasons why I tell all of my students, please study composition, because composition allows you to take any idea and build on it. If you really have those tools and those skills together, right? That's what composition does. You know, divine intervention rarely happens. where you sit down and say, oh, Jesus, make me brilliant. I always tell people all the time, when you sit down and ask Jesus to make you brilliant, you forget the other part of that statement. He says, seek and ye shall find. Right. Not ye shall find. You know what I mean? So you got to go out and do a little bit of the work. Just go out there and experiment. And slowly but surely, things will start to fall into place. I just finished a film for Warner Brothers. It's a remake of Father of the Bride with Latinx cast with Andy Garcia and Gloria Estefan. It's going to be on HBO Max. And it's a comedy. It's a really good movie, really good movie. And when I first started looking at that film, naturally I'm thinking Latin music, right? And I'm like, well, why did they call me to do a Latin score? And I started to talk to the director, and he goes, no, we want a jazz score. Because they have Arturo Sandoval doing a bunch of songs, in his native culture, right? Which really is appropriate. But then they wanted jazz to kind of deal with the comedic things in the film and some of the more sensitive moments as well. And that was one of the things where I had to change my approach. Because my first approach was like thinking something different. And then when they said jazz, come on, man, that's a wide array of styles. You know what I mean? So, and they hired me. So I'm thinking, okay, well, they want what I do. And when I started to do that, they kept saying, no, that wasn't it. So we finally had a breakthrough when he said, I really was looking for like a Django Reinhardt kind of style. And I went, oh, okay. And then that helped me, figure out what it was they wanted to do. And then we just kind of progressed from there. But I'm always trying to take the lead from the story itself. That's the main thing. It's not about what you want to do, it's what the story needs.
When you're, after you get that feeling of where you think it should go, do you ever write thematic material or motifs away from the film, not looking at the film?
I try not to. I did that before, and Spike really helped me with that. Spike said, you're writing to your movie, not his movie. So, and there are composers who can do that. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. It's just a preference for me, because I know some composers that do that. They'll be able to write from a script. Well, I tried that with one of Spike's movies, man. And it really didn't work at all, because cinematically, Spike is so challenging in the things that he does, that you get, for me, all of the pacing was off. The look of the thing was off. I remember, I think it was called the movie Summer of Sam with Mir Sorvino and John Leguizamo. I remember there was one thing I'd read in the script where they had an argument and they were coming from this club, and I was saying, oh, the struggle of that argument was going to be something that I was going to use to write some thematic ideas from. And when Spike shot the scene, he shot the scene with Mir Sorvino jumps out the car, and then there's just an empty car seat. John is still driving, but we see the empty car seat. And then that shook me. I went, oh, okay, well, visually, that's not what I was thinking of. So I try to, wait to see something, because I know my imagination will go in a lot of directions. There's a TV show that I'm up for. I haven't gotten it yet, but there's a TV show that I'm up for, and I've been reading that script, and the script itself is like really amazing. And it's one of the things I've been so tempted to just from the script, because it's beautiful, to sit down and write. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, no, just wait. Because that actually happened to me on another show when I did Perry Mason last year, right? That happened with Perry Mason. I got the script and I said, oh, wow, this is amazing. Start to write some stuff. Didn't use any of it. Wound up rewriting everything.
How does composing for film differ from other forms of composition?
Well, it's all about intent. You know, when I'm writing for my band, man, it's really about what it is that I want to say, how I want to say it, the pace I want to say it, the colors that I want to use. The group that we're going to play with tomorrow is Turtle Island String Quartet and the E Collective. You know, we've been having a lot of fun on the road with that group, and there's no cinematic intention with that group. It's all about just pure musical statement that we're trying to bring across to an audience. And in film is not even really it's not about me. It's not about me at all. It's about the story. So to me it boils down to intention. The techniques of composition and developing ideas are still the same. That never changes, for me at least. That doesn't change. But, you know, if I'm working on a scene that has important dialogue, I have to think about it in terms of how do I support that dialogue? I don't have to think about it in terms of what do I want to say musically. No, because those two things are two totally different things. You know, so if I had to boil it down to anything, that would be the one word. It's intention.
How do you compose music that stays out of the frequency range of the actors' voices and the special effects?
Woo, man, that's been a tough one over the years, because how do I say this? Sometimes we get influenced by bad movies. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is, and I'm not gonna call any movies out, but what I mean by that is sometimes, how do I put this? Sometimes there are films that are put together that are not the original intention of what the director wanted, but you don't know that as a viewer, right? So sometimes you'll hear things that have orchestrations that have no business being under dialogue. But they kept it because they couldn't find anything else, they couldn't do anything else, they just turned it down, right? Well, here I come, you know, young film composer, new to the business, not realizing that that may be the case, trying to do those things and finding problems with directors, you know? So then I started to realize, yeah, that was bad craftsmanship that I was influenced by. So when I started to look at good craftsmanship, I started to realize how it's about finding space for certain things to exist, you know? So I'm always very leery of the voice. And it's very much like opera in a sense, you know, some actors have deeper voices, obviously, and some actors have higher voices. But for me, the main thing that I try to do is to keep the momentum going of a musical idea, but then pare it back. You know, there's certain instruments that I use, man, I haven't used them in a while, but like alto flute, that could be your best friend in any situation. I don't know what it is about alto flute, you know, because regular flute and piccolo flute don't do the same thing. But man, the alto flute, you can give it a melody, you can damn near stick it up at the same level as the dialogue.
Mancini used to use 4 of them.
Right.
With Peter Gunn.
See?
We spoke about that in class the other day.
It's something about the tone of that thing, you know. But here's the other part of it too. It's not just about staying out of the frequency. It's about staying out of their way, you know. And one of the things that I love doing, especially Spike really got into this when I started doing it in his films, is almost to use the voice as like a counterline to what it is you're doing melodically, musically, you know. So if I took a theme, you know, I would space that theme out, you know, in between dialogue. So it wouldn't just be in 4/4. Sometimes it would have to be in 5 or 3. Sometimes it would have to be a 3/8 bar in there, something like that. But I would do it in such a way where you wouldn't really feel the meter change. You know what I mean? Because it's not about the meter change. It's really about the relationship that the music will have with the dialogue. You know, and that's another approach that's really subtle, you know. And it's something that I had to learn how to do with Spike, because Spike still wanted to hear melody during these long soliloquies in his film, you know. And in Spike's films, those scenes carry important information, you know, about the stories. So I've had to learn how to space things out, how to use certain instruments like alto, flute, and other things. Sometimes I use cello, even though cello is in the same register of the voice, right? Cello can be intrusive. But I use it in such a way where sometimes I lead the cello right up to where the dialogue is going to come in, and the cello will stop, and then and it'll be this relationship going back and forth. But hopefully, it's not anything you notice. You know, it's not supposed to be something that you notice. It's only supposed to be something that helps propel a scene. You know, sometimes my friends will come up to me and go, "Man, I went to the movies. I love your music. I heard," and that's a great compliment. Don't get me wrong, but you know, it's really about the story more so than it is about my music.
When working with Spike Lee, do you spot the film with him? In other words, determine where the music starts and stops?
Yeah, you know,
hits.
when we do spotting sessions, for those who don't know, spotting sessions is when you sit down with the film and you literally watch the film from beginning to end, and you try to figure out where music's going to come in, where it's going to go out, and things like that. That is probably the most integral part of me and Spike's relationship. You know, figuring out where those things go, because man, he loves music. You know, and he'll have music everywhere. So I always have the inspiring sessions are really important, because I need to know from him, you know, what songs he's thinking about using in certain spots. Because I'll never forget, man, when we did Fever, which was my first movie that I scored, I really wanted to do the drug den scene. You know, when I watched it, I went, "Oh man, this is gonna be killing. I could write some really dramatic music for this." But no, he put a Stevie Wonder song there. You know what I mean? So that's why the spotting sessions are like really, really important, because if I'm going through the film by myself, man, you know I would pick some scenes that he's used music for. And the most important thing about doing that with him is that he's one of the few guys that really understands how to use music cinematically, you know, or not just music, anything. I'll never forget Summer of Sam. I think it's Yogi Berra. He is calling a baseball game, and Berkowitz is trying to find a new. I hate to say that, but he's trying to find another person that he's going to attack or kill. And this woman sees him, then she runs into her house, and you hear Yogi Berra go, "Swing and a miss." You know, it was brilliant how he put all of those things together. And he does the same thing with music. And the thing that I love about what Spike does, most directors don't do this. If the song is in the film when I'm watching it, the song is going to be there in the movie, right? And that's very important for those who are just filmmakers in the audience and on Zoom. The reason why that's important is because it allows me to say, okay, what key is that song in? Okay, do I want to go against that key, or do I want to lead up into that? Do I want to come out of that in a certain way? You know, it's been frustrating sometimes when I work on a film and you get this tone from a song, and you say, okay, let me just use a string cluster right here that can slowly modulate and then go right into this thing without it being intrusive, without it seeming like something startled you like that. And you get it just right, and then the movie comes out and there's a different song there. You know what I mean? So with Spike, that doesn't really happen. He's really great about that. But spotting the film is where he also, and I didn't tell you this part earlier, where he also wants to identify what themes go where.
Does he tell you the tone of the music for each scene that he's looking for?
No,
He's not specific.
no, man, it's so interesting, my relationship with Spike when it comes to films. The hardest thing that and I shouldn't say hard, the most intricate thing that we do is the spotting session, you know, because he'll sit down and say, okay, I want this to be so-and-so's theme, you know, okay, I want this to be so-and-so's theme. We give here, go back to so-and-so's theme here. That's what we do. And it will take a day. We'll go through it all day, you know, just to get through reel one, which is probably about 15 minutes. It'll probably take us an hour to do it, you know, because that part of it's really detailed. And then the next part that's really detailed is me coming up with the thematic ideas for him. Spike is very unique in that regard. He doesn't want mock-ups. He hates them. You know, he wants to hear his thematic ideas played on the piano. So I make audio recordings of all of these thematic ideas that I come up with, and I send them to him. And then he literally says, well, that sounds like so-and-so to me. That sounds like so-and-so to me. And then he starts to identify where those themes go in terms of what, you know, what characters we're assigning them to. And then once we do that, maybe we have a conversation about orchestration. I remember for Black Klansman, he said he wanted to have like an R&B band be a part of the score. I think for Inside Man, he said he wanted to feature a saxophone. You know, we were going to get Branford, but Branford couldn't do it. So we wound up getting Bryce Winston, the guy that played in my band, to do it. But other than that, no. And then from that point on, he doesn't hear the music until we get to the studio. And I know that that's like unfathomable for some directors, you know, because some directors are really hands-on. But Spike doesn't do that. And again, this is for the filmmakers and audience. The thing you have to realize about that is that if you get the right composer, it makes them work harder. Because if a person puts that much trust in you, you don't want to let them down. You know what I mean? So I'm looking at the film, I'm watching the scenes over and over again. I'm like, does this make sense? My kids hate it because if they walk by my room, I go, hey, come in here. You know, and like, God damn it, I almost got away. You know?
I would be petrified not for them not to hear a mock-up prior to going into this.
Well, yeah, I know some people are, but Spike that's the way he is. And I don't ever want to betray that trust. To me, that's like a real special thing. And it's always funny, man, because I work with other directors and they'll be needling me, and you know, they'll blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, man, I just wonder, how do you and Spike work? And I'm like, bro, you don't want to know. You really don't. As one guy, I told him, I said, bro, you want to know, because it's totally the opposite from what we're doing now. You know, I said, you have to trust. You have to trust me. You have to, you know, believe that I can see you. I can realize your vision, probably in a way that you can't see just yet. You know, and I understand it for directors. The directors are in control of everything until it gets to the music, because the music is one area that not all, but most directors don't have a vocabulary for. You know,
I do.
and it can be a rough thing for them. So they're trying to control something without having the vocabulary to control it or convey to you what it is that they're looking for. So that part of it can be rough. But with a guy like Spike, he respects everybody. He does the same thing with his editor, Barry. You know, he lets Barry go, and Barry will come up with things and cut things together, and they sit down there and go through it. You know, and with Spike, I think I've only had to rewrite one scene throughout our entire career. You know, and that was for Miracle at St. Anna, at the opening battle sequence, right? No, there was two. There was one in Crooklyn for the little girl. And both of them were for the same reason. I'm just realizing this. Because what happened in both scenes, I was scoring what was happening on picture, right? And Spike didn't want that. He wanted to be more operatic, like just a melodic, sweeping sound
Go
throughout the
against the
entire,
picture.
going against the picture.
Right.
So with Miracle at St. Anna, man, I had written all of this syncopated stuff for that battle scene in the front. And he goes, no, 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 no. It should be the theme, man. It should be like really big and blah. And I went, oh, okay. And he's only had to do that to me twice. So I understand that. So when it came time to do the Five Bloods, I knew exactly what it is that he wanted.
Do rough cuts from other directors usually have a temp track that you first hear? And does that help you with the spotting?
Temp tracks, I don't know if you guys know what temp tracks are, but temp tracks is when they have temporary music put in so they can show it to the studio. Because again, Spike is the only guy that I've ever seen screen a movie for the studio heads with no music in it. Yeah, but it was 25th Hour. We were screening it for the head of Disney. And man, I was sitting there cringing the whole time. I was like, wow, this thing has no music in it. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie with no music in it. Man, it can be really deep. But some guys, Spike never puts temps in his films. Other people I've worked with, they put temps. Temps don't really bother me. I think sometimes temps can be helpful, based on my conversation with the director. Like if this is something that you intended, the tempo, the pace of it, the color of it, that can be helpful to me in terms of how I create. Because being a jazz musician, I can listen to something and not write that. You know what I mean? I can break it down to its core elements. Oh, it's using this type of harmony. It's using cluster harmony, or it's using open harmony. Oh, I see he wants, higher strings here. Or I break it down to those elements. I don't break it down to what the chord progressions are and what the melodic content is. I don't do that. I break it down to its core elements, and then when I start to create, I create with those core elements in mind. That just happened on Father of the Bride. There was one scene, a young director, man, that I've been working, a really smart guy, man. Guys is something else. But he's new to this level of film scoring, right? So he kept saying jazz, 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 jazz. But then there's a scene when the daughter comes home, where in the temp, he has just like a little simple string line. That's why I got that's why I was thinking about it when I was just talking about it. But when I wrote the scene for him, what I was doing, he said he just wanted a jazz ensemble. But it kept bugging him, right? And I had to tell him, I said, well, I think you really want strings. And when I took the same piece of music and added just a string line, when the daughter comes in and then have it bloom a little bit, he goes, that's it. So for me, it's not about copying the temp. It's not that. But there may be core elements in it that people respond to.
When you're working with other directors, do most of them ask you to do mock-ups?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of them asked me to do mock-ups. And that was the problem with this last film, because trying to do a mock-up for a jazz ensemble
is impossible.
And I kept telling them, I was like, dude, I'm gonna have this young, amazing drummer named Jonathan Barber. The pianist is gonna be Gerald Clayton. The guitarist is gonna be the guy who's gonna play with me tomorrow, Charles Altura. And the bassist was Christian McBride.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, trust me, dude.
Gonna sound good.
Right. It's gonna be a hell of a lot better than what I'm doing in this thing right here. Well, it just seems like, I'm like, man, you gotta go on faith here. And we had big discussions about it. And it became a thing, because man, it became such a thing that when we got to the first session and they played the very first cue, I couldn't help myself. I was out in the studio and the director was in the control room. I said, "Hey, brother, you get it now?"
Good.
You know, and he could, "Yes, I do. This is amazing." Like I tried to tell you, man. I'm like, you listening to me play drums and basic guitar. No, it's not gonna happen, you know? And I know people get confused because when you do mock-ups with orchestral synths, you can come closer to approximating what an orchestral cue will be like. And I don't even like doing that either because there's something that happens in a room with live musicians that you can't simulate. I mean, you can try, but you can't. And for those of you out here, this is my theory behind this. Not only are the samples are really great and they've come a long way. They sound really good. But one of the things that you have to really remember is that a sample is a recording, right? So when you hit a C on a sample, they've recorded the overtones for that C, right? And then you add an E to another string, I don't care, whoever you want to give it to, they recorded the overtones for that E, and you play them together and you hear this C and E, you go, oh, that sounds beautiful. But something about it doesn't sound right. And in my mind, it's that those overtones and those samples don't change. Whereas if you put those people in a room together, the way they do that, the law of physics kicks in, right? Not only does the law of physics kick in, the human nature kicks in. You know how many times I've done, man, I'll never forget when we were doing Harriet Tubman, and I did a mock-up for it. And Casey understood. Casey Lim is the director, she understood totally, but it was just something for me. You know, when we got to the studio, you get emotional because you're sitting there working on this music and you're doing these mock-ups and you're sitting there for like a month doing this stuff. And you stand in front of a real orchestra and that thing just grows exponentially because people are in a room and they're motivated by what it is that they're playing. And then they bring something else to it that you can't perceive. You know, that's the thing. I think if there's one thing I can tell you guys, don't think that you know it all. You know what I mean? Allow room for people to bring something to your music. You know, you have to, because that's the human element. That's the thing that makes us all gravitate towards it. That's the universal thing. You know, and I'm always amazed at that. There was a great cellist in London. His name is Tony Pleeth. I had written this cello solo for a couple of scenes in 25th Hour. And, you know, I didn't send the mock-ups to Spike because he's not into that, but I was using it for myself just to write with, you know. And I never forget when I stood in front of him, he was sitting right, I could see it just clear as day. When he started to play, I got lost in my conducting. He brought so much to that music. I started to cry. I was like, there's no way in hell I wrote that. You know what I mean?
I do.
And this guy, he's just one of those special people. So we come back for another film that I was doing. I can't think of the name. It was Antonio Banderas. Anyway, it'll come to me. And Tony couldn't make the session because we were at Air Studios in London. He was at Abbey Road doing this movie, Enemy of the Gate, right? Enemy at the Gate, I think it's called. And we had this young cellist there, and bless her heart, I mean, she sounded great. She just wasn't Tony, right? And everybody in the orchestra knew, because then, you know, we've all worked together. And even she knew. I mean, you know. So we did a take without her. And the director, and I said, because the woman who's a contractor there, Isabel, she said, you know, well, if you do a take without him, we could get Tony to come back in later on after he finishes over there, just to overdub. So when we did that, the director was going, really? Really? You gonna do that? I'm like, bruh, I'm telling you, man. And when this guy came in and he started to play, the director looked at me and he goes, "Oh my God." I said, "Hey, I was trying to tell you. Did I do that? No, I didn't. You allow people to bring stuff to your music. This last film, Christian McBride, I told Christian McBride, I said, bro, I hate you. I hate you, because I said, right, there was this one little scene where there was no music, and at the last minute we kept saying, man, there needs to be something right there. And I said, oh, why don't we just do like a little bass thing? And I said, I'll come up with something. And Christian goes, well, let me try something. And it was killing. I mean, it was killing. I was sitting there going, dude, what are you trying to do to me, man? It was amazing.
How often does the director ask you to revise a scene or recompose a scene?
It depends on the film. I mean, I did a lot of that for this last film, Fall of the Bride, but I think a lot of that had to do with our communication in terms of, this thing, jazz. When you say jazz to a jazz musician, man, that can mean a lot, And for him, it meant like one thing, because that's what he listens to, And he didn't know how to convey that to me at first. So we had to go through that. And then there were certain things that he would respond to that were interesting to me. So the final scene for me, not the final scene of the movie, but the final scene for me, this big scene where they're scurrying around, there's a lot of activity going on. And I had written it based on what we had been doing in the film earlier. And then there's a portion at the end of it where Antonio and Andy Garcia's character, makes a big switch. So that's when I started to open up harmonically, and his thing was he wanted that feeling throughout the entire scene, and it was an interesting debate. We both had a debate about it for about 40 minutes, talking about it, and then I said, well, let me just do it. And when I went and did it, he fell all over it, and he loved it, and it works well on the scene. It was so interesting because the film editor was there too, and it was one of those things where the film editor said, he says, both of you guys have valid points about how to handle a scene, how to resolve the movie, right? But at the end of the day, it's like I said, it's the director's viewpoint. It's his movie, it's not mine. And having said that, when I did the other version, I'm still trying to service the movie as best I can, and it works. It worked really well. And there were a bunch of other scenes, not to that degree, where we had discussions, but that's rare. For the most part, when I'm working with people, I don't go through that much, There are times when I have to revise scenes because they're not finished editing, which is a little bit frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be frustrating because sometimes you get timings down for your musical ideas to flow, and then all of a sudden they cut. Now, and I'm going to say this again to filmmakers in the room, if there are any, when you have dead air in a scene, don't necessarily cut that out because it's dead air if there's going to be music underneath. Because that's what music can make a little statement and be the glue to carry you from one thing to the next. And I had that happen to me on a film years ago where they would, and it was weird because they were cutting the scene while I was scoring another version of the scene and didn't tell me they were cutting it, right? So when we got to the studio, yeah, I know, yeah, man, yeah. So we get to the studio and the video's off. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And, oh, we got new video. I'm like, that would have been nice to know. So the director goes, well, go back and put it in the old video. And when we put in the old video, that's the reason why he cut out that little snippet of the scene. He goes, oh, this works. Oh, I see what's happening. We're going to go back to this. We're going to go back to this. So don't always think just because there's like a moment or two of nothing happening that you gotta get rid of that. You know, if you have a composer who really knows what they're doing, that one little second or two can be like something where the music can swell like that and then just carry you over into the other part of the scene.
Do you compose in a DAW?
Yeah, I yes, I compose, and reason why I'm laughing is because I don't use anything that everybody else uses. I use Digital Performer.
I used to use it.
Yeah, see, you said used to.
I
See,
use Logic now.
right, everybody, right, right. Everybody uses Logic and Cubase. And I've tried, man. I've tried to switch over, but I'm a creature of habit, man. I'm a creature. I get upset when they switch things in DP. Like, you know, hey
Mhm.
man, I've been going over to the left over here and boom, and that's when I find my bounce to disc. Why did you need to move that? You know, I really, to this day, I don't understand that. I don't understand why you need to move the menus. You know what I mean? Okay, functionality, certain things like that you're adding, okay, fine. But why move that from here to here? And I think it's just that they want to mess with you. That's the only thing I can come up with. You know what I mean? It's like, let's get them, watch this. This will be funny.
You're right. Do you also use a notation program such as Sibelius or Finale?
No. I don't use the notation programs. I'd still, I do all of the MIDI stuff and I send it off to my orchestrator and Howard Drozen, and he does all of that for me. I still use pencil and paper when I have to write. You know, like when I was doing my opera, man, I still have score pages, you know, all over the place. For me, there's a certain type of connection that I get from actually writing out the music. I can't explain it, but there's something that happens to me by putting it on paper with my own hand. That's a little different than doing it. Now with film, you know, you're working under the gun. You know, there's a time issue. So sometimes I don't get a chance to do that in film. You know, because I always feel like, and I don't. It's not that I feel. They always make you feel like they needed it yesterday. You know what I mean? So you have to constantly work fast. But with opera and some of the stuff that I do with my band, I can actually sit down and take my time with it.
Do you record your orchestral film scores live?
Oh yeah, that's one of the things we try to do as much as we can. With Father of the Bride, we didn't we did it in sections. You know, we had reason why we did it in sections because we had a big band one day and then we had strings another day, and we didn't want to have both of them there at the same time. But for just about everything else that I've done, when I have full orchestra, we have full orchestra in the room, and only times we may overdub things if the percussion become a little too big, you know, to control in the mix.
Right.
You know, we'll do a take and have them lay out, and then we'll have a percussion day later on. But I always think it's important to have everybody in the room because then everybody can understand what the music, what's going on with the music, and how things relate and how they function.
Do you usually use a click track, a metronome?
Oh yeah. We use click tracks all the time, and for me, it's interesting. You know, Miles Goodman was my mentor in the business, and he rarely used. Well, I shouldn't say he rarely used click track, but because he did. But a lot of times he would do some things freehanded. Never. I've never gotten enough confidence in my conducting skills to do that. You know, and you know what it is because the orchestra always react to you. You know what I mean? You know, like if with a jazz band will go da 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 da, right? When the orchestra goes da 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 da, and that throws me off every time, man. You know what I mean? And I know people who can handle it, but for me, I wind up doing. I'm like, no, pick up, and then the scene is all screwed. You know, so I'm trying to get to the point where I can get accustomed to that. I was working at the Met, man. I was watching Yannick, who's the conductor there. He's like amazing with that. You know what I mean? I just don't have that skill, and I know that I don't have that skill. You know what I
It's
mean?
tough.
So I don't have no ego about not having that skill. I'm not one of those people who's gonna sit up there and lie to you, you know? So I use a click track a lot. I mean, there's been a few times when I've done it without, but for the most part, we use a click track.
What advice do you have for a student who wants to become a film composer?
Well, first thing is learn your skills, like I was saying earlier about composition. That's the most important thing, you know, because you never know what the director's gonna want. You never know what the director's gonna be inspired by. And having the skill as a composer, you could be able to take this, that, and make a composition out of it, right? Just that rhythm. That's the most important thing. The next thing is learn how to be flexible, you know? Learn how to be flexible. I sometimes composers will take it as a personal indictment on their music if they receive certain types of criticism that doesn't make sense musically to them. You know? But the thing that you have to remember is you're the musician, they're not. If I walked on a set, I couldn't talk to them about lenses and lighting. Have no clue, you know? So there's no need for me to sit up there, hey man, why don't you put the light over here? You know? So when I'm getting critiques from people, sometimes it stings that initial, I'm human. Sometimes the initial statements, they sting, you know, but then I have to realize he doesn't mean that. He's just trying to convey his thought to me, right? So you got to develop a tough skin when it comes to that, right? And the other part of it too is be organized. Be organized, please. Don't sit down, like I said earlier, and wait for divine intervention. You know, when I work on certain movies, man, I look at the cue sheet, which is a sheet that has a list of all of the cues. I time it up. Oh, 66 minutes of music. How many weeks do I have? Let me divide those weeks. Let me divide 66 by those weeks, which means I have to write a certain number of minutes a day to stay on track. I don't want to sit down and just write and then say, oh, I don't have it today, I'll work tomorrow. No. I don't want to be that guy freaking out going into the studio unfinished. Me, when I go to the studio, the only thing that's unfinished is them printing out the music. You know, I want to have everything done so I can relax and try. I try to create the most stress-free environment scoring a film known to man. You know, because there's too many other variables that you can't foresee that may pop up. So why add to the stress? So that's why being organized and diligent is extremely important. Is extremely important, right? You know, and then when you get to the studio, man, look, like I said, ideas can come from anywhere. Do you want to be right or do you want to be good? You know, I have great people that work with me, man. My engineer, Greg Hayes, sometimes he comes up with good ideas and and it's interesting the way we work. You know, if he has an idea, he talks to me right in my cans, not to the orchestra. And he say, T, why don't you think about this? And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'll give him credit. I'm like, oh, all right, Greg, let's go ahead and try. We're gonna try this and boom, boom. And stuff may work. It's not about me proving how brilliant I am. It's not that at all. You gotta throw that away, bro. Because that's the stuff that gets you in trouble. Because if you can never admit that you're wrong, you're gonna be in a world of trouble, right? And then people are not gonna bring their best to you. You know, we have people, man, just because of the way we run sessions, we have people who travel from all over the country to come to LA. If they hear that we're doing a session with Spike or anybody, man, they come from Chicago, New York, and they come out to LA to be a part of the session. You know, and I take pride in that, and how that operates and how people are motivated to be a part of these sessions, to be a part of this process, you know? So learn your craft, right? Stay organized and turn your ego off, okay?
Any questions so far? Speak up, because it's hard for us to see you. None so far?
Yes.
I would like to know, related to your practice specifically, but what was your reaction to listening to Birdman and Tony Sanchez's score?
Oh man, he wants to know what was my reaction to listening to Birdman. I love that score. Here's the reason why I love that score, you know, because it was something different. Somebody took a chance. You know what I mean? It's like it wasn't a cookie cutter kind of thing, you know? And when I heard it, I went, wow. It reminded me of Dave Grusin's score to The Firm, where it's just piano, right? And I'm sitting there going, wow, it's interesting to be able to do that in a way where a director will allow you to do that. You know what I'm saying? Because, bro, can you see me going, hey man, I want to score your movie just with drums? You know what I mean? It's like, excuse me? That'd be the end of that conversation for most people. But it's very akin to, I just did a film with Regina King, One Night in Miami. And it's basically just piano, right? And the thing that's interesting about that, when you do that, man, everything becomes important. Everything becomes important. You know, if you hit a note like this, bang, bang, that same note is a different emotion if you go, right? And you have to be mindful of that when you. So it's an interesting thing. I really give him a lot of props, man, for doing that. You know, plus he's a cool dude. He's a great musician. Yes. You need a microphone,
You
dude.
need the mic.
Yeah. You're real cool.
Hello, how are you? My question was regarding the orchestras. You said that for every movie, is there a different ensemble? Are these ensembles something that you select or the composer? And if there's a way for young people to become members of the orchestra that you work with?
Well, yeah, I mean, he wants to know about different ensembles and do I select them? For the most part, I do. You know, in terms of becoming a part of that, that's something that's a little out of my hands. I'll just tell you this, when I worked in LA, one of the things that I told Peter Rotter and Sandy DeCrescent when I first started working with them years ago, the only thing that I said was, I can't step out there in front of an all-white orchestra. That was my only demand, right? And as a result, they started finding all different types of people to be on the sessions. Now, what's cool about that, they've been finding a lot of young people. That's the thing I was telling you about, these people coming from all over the place. I didn't have anything to do with that, but it's been cool because, man, you know, it's like a little network. Everybody's been talking about, oh, you should hear this one, you should hear that one. Now, when it comes to selecting the size orchestra, a lot of that will be on me in terms of what I think the film needs. I did this film called Red Tails with George Lucas, right? And, you know, George he's another one, he doesn't listen much. Once you get the themes and stuff, I kept wanting to play stuff for him, and he's like, no, I know it's gonna be fine. He just said, just make it big, just make it big, you know? And I went, okay. So I kept thinking in terms of like huge orchestra, heavy brass, heavy percussion, you know, all of that stuff. And then Rick McCullum, the guy that works with George, he goes, you don't want choir? And I'm thinking, cost. And then he goes, you want choir. You know what I mean? I went, I want choir. You know what I mean? All right, cool. So that was like, there's sometimes things like that happen. Sometimes with Spike will say, Spike's thing is, what instrument haven't we featured? You know, he'll do that. But in terms of the size of the orchestra, he'll leave that up to me. You know, now granted, I haven't gone to one of those Hans Zimmer size style orchestra where, you know, you got double brass, double winds, and just double everything. You know, I haven't done that yet, but I have had really big orchestras. I think the biggest one I've ever had was like 95 people in a room, you know, and it's a beautiful thing when you have the luxury to do that. That doesn't always happen at the beginning of your film career, just to be honest. You know what I mean? That's where your creativity is going to have to come in. Sometimes you only get a deal for 15 musicians. And you have to figure out, well, out of those 15 musicians, what are the colors that I need the most, right? To really help tell the story. And then you go from there, you know? It was so interesting, you know, with some films, well, even with Father of the Bride, you know, we had big band and then we had a string session. But the thing about the big band session was some of that stuff was just, I used them just as orchestral brass. You know what I mean? Not jazz, just straight playing, right? Because we didn't have the resources to do both. So you have to kind of figure out a way to combine things. I'll never forget, years ago, there was a film that I did with Angelina Jolie. Damn, I can't think of the name of it. It was about this model, and the film was named after her. It'll come to me. And we had, I think I had 6 musicians, maybe a little more, but 3 of them were clarinets, right? Because I'd said, oh, this sound could work. I knew that, you know, the bass clarinet and 2 B-flat clarinets could have a certain type of rich, kind of dark kind of sound to it, right? So that's what I used along with the rhythm section, and then the rest of it is kind of like some synthetic instruments and stuff like that. Okay.
Any other questions about film?
What's something you know now that you wish you knew 20 or 30 years ago?
Whew, just one. No, I mean, no, there's so many things. Most of it is, to be honest, not to freak out when presented with a film or presented with criticism. You know, the beginning of my career, I used to take the criticism personally. You know what I mean? And I'm like, dude, what are you saying? That's my music. That's my music. But I've learned that people are not in this business to come down on you. They're not. That's not the reason why they're there. It's not the reason why they hired you. You know what I mean? If you got the job, you probably got the job because they like what you do. You know what I mean? So you can't take the criticism personally. You have to understand. Miles Goodman told me 10% of your salary is for writing music. 90% of your salary is for translating what it is people are trying to tell you, right? So that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. And if there's something else that I've probably learned, and I don't even know how to put this into words, is that you need to take more chances. Sometimes a film can handle more than what you think it can. There was a crazy film that I did, it's called Bunraku. You should look it up, you can see it, watch it online, because the film is bananas. It stars Josh Hartnett, Demi Moore, and it's a martial arts movie. You know, where Josh, he plays this cowboy. It's a very surrealistic film, but it's cool as all get out, right? And when I started working on that thing, I would try these different things for certain scenes, and then I said, "Oh, that's it." And I said, "No, that's not it. Let me experiment with some stuff." And the more I experimented, the more and more I started to find a different movie. You know what I mean? So don't be afraid to try things, you know, because you may surprise yourself, you know, and it's one of those things that it's hard for me to put into words, but I know it from experience. Like Roger would always tell me, the little musical person is sitting on your shoulders going, "Hey," right? Your ego is the one that doesn't listen, right? But because you know sometimes I shouldn't say it's ego. Sometimes it's fatigue. Sometimes you want to be finished. You go, "Oh man, I got it. That's it. That's it." And that little voice is in the back of your head going, "Come on, bro. Come on, bro. You know better." So I've learned to listen to that more, right? I've learned to pick my energy up to redo something, you know, because like when you're in this business, you know, and I've talked to a lot of composers about this. We sit in the room by ourselves, right, with the film, and sometimes you're eager to get out of that. You know, it's like, "Oh man, I want to be done." No, make sure that you exhaust everything, you know, because you're only cheating yourself from having a really beautiful experience, you know. With Boon Raku, I learned that a lot, you know. The more and more I threw at the film, the more and more the film would just go, "Come on." And I went, "Wow, okay." I felt like I was being lazy, you know, and that turned me around because I don't like that feeling. I don't, and I'll just tell you this too, you know, you don't ever want to go to a film feeling like you could have done more because it's too late by that time. It's too late. So, you know, don't take the criticism personally, right? Keep all your options open and experiment and try things. Listen, the only thing somebody can do is tell you that doesn't work. They're not going to shoot you. At least not the people I've worked with. You know what I mean? So, I mean, the only thing that can happen is if somebody says, "Oh man," you know, and you go, "Okay, cool. I'll come back with something else."
Dr. Wilt, how much time do we have?
I think we're just about out of time, but we got one more question I wanted to share. So we've got some of our film studies majors watching from our Fort Lauderdale campus. So the question from them was, what would you suggest to student filmmakers who are looking to find composers to collaborate with or to learn how to collaborate with composers?
That's a tough one, but I think, you know, the best way to do that is to be online. You know, putting your music and your ideas on social media tends to draw attention to you. That's been happening to my son. You know, he's a songwriter, and my daughter. They've been putting their music, putting little snippets of things, and people start to go, "Oh man, hey, you know, you want to get together and work." And then there are other places where it's not totally advertised all the time, but you have to go out and look for these symposiums. Like Sundance Film Labs has a summer program that I think is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. What they do is they bring in 6 writers from all over the world. They screen them and they have them come in and develop these short scripts. And then they'll bring in 6 directors and pair them with the writers. And then you find actors, I mean A-list actors, who will come in and donate their time and act out these shorts, and they shoot them, right? And then they bring in 6 composers that they screen, you know, and when they bring in the 6 composers, they pair them with the directors and they score the shorts. But then also the 6 composers will all do like a lot of different types of workshops where they all screen the score the same scene. You know, I've had 2 people in my band go to that thing, Fabian Almazan and Derek Hodge, and it turned their lives around. You know what I mean? I've taught there, maybe, you know, there's a bunch of people who came from there. Rachel Portman had some of her assistants come from there, you know, and it's a thing where they give you these workstations to work on. And what was cool about it, the last couple of times that I did it, all of the composers played different instruments. So they were collaborating, moving back and forth. One of the composers was a flautist. She would play on somebody else's score. One of the other person was a guitarist, and then he would play on somebody else's score. You know, things like that happen. So it's all, for me right now, it's all about programs like that, and then social media. You know, I think is the way to go.
Well, let's all thank Terence Blanchard for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.